Most business owners get stuck. They're overwhelmed, can't scale, and don't have the right people or systems in place. But after 25 years of building, scaling, and exiting companies, and helping hundreds of entrepreneurs do the same, I've found that there are only 5 key reasons businesses fail to grow. In this video, I'll break them down so you can pinpoint exactly what's holding you back and how to fix it. The top 5 reasons businesses fail to scale. The first is operational bottlenecks. A lot of us are either one leader environments where we don't have other management teams or things like that. And most of us have to do a big mirror test here and say, are we the problem? Right? I think Taylor Swift had a song about that, right? So, hey, me, it's me or something, I don't remember. So anyway, operational bottlenecks and a lack of infrastructure. As we build, there's a program that we actually reviewed in our group a year or so ago. We'll always bring that out once a year or so, called the E-Myth. And the E-Myth concept is just the basic principle of building an organization around you that doesn't require you to be there. And this is, again, where the operational bottlenecks oftentimes come. This is where we need to extract ourselves from the company and say what's slowing down our growth or keeping us from being able to grow. Next is cash flow management and unsustainable growth. I have a lot of people in the construction business. And in the construction business, oftentimes you have to lay out money before you receive money. And so a lot of times what happens in that business is they're scaling really well, they're doing great, they get some great jobs and they run out of cash in the process. Or they put themselves in over leveraged. And then what happens is they've got all this leverage out there and then someone's delayed on paying and they can't meet their leverage requirements and end up in trouble. So making sure that you're forecasting the needs of cash flow and making arrangements to manage through that process, and even having a plan B and C, particularly on the cash-based side, so that you don't end up just kind of getting so stressed out that you just can't continue on. Weak market demand or poor customer acquisition. In the accounting world, we're kind of fighting with Intuit, the company that we use to support most of our clients with, because they're automating things. And a lot of people, whether it's real or not, believe, based on the marketing that's done by the software company, that a lot of this can be automated. The AICPA, which is the governing body of the CPA licensure, is constantly telling accountants to add value to their customers because they're going to be replaced by computers. Do you need a CPA to do your taxes, or can you just use TurboTax? Those kind of things. Really good question. And I would say that I tell a lot of people to use TurboTax now because it's super easy and it's, they have a W-2 and that's all they got, and no need to pay a couple $100 for someone to do that for you, because all they're going to do is sit on the side of the desk and actually probably fill in the same software that you could pay nothing to use, right? And so weak market demand is something we need to be paying attention to. It's also a flex area that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Hiring the wrong team or scaling too fast. Some of us have experienced that. A few years ago, for those of you who know me, I got a chance during COVID to operate a laboratory company out of California. We built 7 laboratories in 3 years and went from 72 employees to 1,250. Yeah, that's what yeah. So the reason I wear a hat is because I lost most of my hair during that time. But no, it was kind of crazy, and we made a ton of mistakes. But we knew that was going to happen at the speed at which we were operating under circumstances that we were not familiar with. So we prepared for those mistakes. We literally hired and retained a couple of attorneys to deal with human resource related issues that we were sloppy with, knowing that the speed at which we were building this infrastructure could potentially raise some problems, right? And so as we went through that process, we had to be really careful. Because we were hiring so fast, we also had to be very quick to discipline and terminate if necessary, because we had to have the right people on the bus in order to drive the bus at that speed. The last is leadership limitations and resistance to change. So Sean, you nailed it right from the beginning, right? If the leader doesn't have a plan associated with the growth and the scaling of the company, no one else probably will either. And maybe one person will, and what'll happen with that person is they're going to probably go off on their own and go, these guys are nuts. They don't know what they're doing. I'm going over here because I've got a plan and I'm going to take that somewhere else. So let's address these issues. So inconsistent workflows or lack of SOPs. Who really nails it on the SOP side of their operations? Who can run their business without being there right now? Sean, all right. Tell me some of the steps. Well, yeah, that's good. Tell me more.
I mean, that's an open-ended question.
So let's start with some of the basic epiphanies you had, because I will almost guarantee that when you started, you didn't have that, where you could just turn the thing on and then just hire a couple people and then walk out of the office.
Yeah, no, it all started with me 10 years ago. And, And I basically had read the E-Myth, and it changed my life. And I just started replacing myself. I just started documenting checklists, videos, recording myself, and just replacing myself. And I feel like the vision was important. Like I never wanted 50 people.
Right.
I wanted 10 rock stars.
Right.
10 people that were going to be with me for the, next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And so when I brought these people on, what I had learned was to have them create the standard operating procedures based on what I had learned in the journey. So they started creating the checklist, the videos, because they did it better than I do. So I have just learned in the last 3 or 4 years to work on my leadership and empower them to create those SOPs. So now we have a document. It's called the playbook.
It's awesome. And I'm sure the playbook is evolving. Yeah.
Sure.
As we go through, we start to realize, and then we empower our staff to update that and say, hey, what are you seeing as a bottleneck, team? Exactly. What can we make better? Because oftentimes they get the playbook, they train on the playbook, and they're holding in their heads, well, gosh, if we just did this versus that, or if we did this first, it would make all these other things much faster because there's new technology that came in or something that changed. I work with a lot of business owners. One of the reasons they left the corporate world or working for someone else was because they got unrealistic goals. They got, not enough tools to do the job and all that. And then they go into their company and they do the exact same thing. They say, well, corporate says that we should be growing. This is what the standard is. And, we go from there and we got online and so, well, what do people in the plumbing industry grow each year? And we follow their guideline. We don't stress our company out and say, okay, how far could we push it before something breaks? And I think that that's a really good way for you to look at your business because we live up to our own limitations. And oftentimes our limitations are in our mind, in our hearts, or just in our place. We look around and go, well, I got one guy to do that. So, okay, that's as far as I can go. Without going, well, we can get 4 more. Let's figure it out. I want 10 guys and ladies to do this job with me and be really good. Why not have 50? And part of the reason is because you want to be able to know them and touch them and do this thing. We'll figure out a way to know 50 people. Let's go to that level and say, how do we serve at the level that we want to? And the solution to this is oftentimes one that hurts a lot of business owners, and it's that you're probably not the right person to help make all of those decisions. You should be making a lot of those decisions, but this is where you probably need to step out of your comfort zone and look at a coach, look at another person in the industry who's got some longer longevity. And so we got to get to those realizations, and then we have to follow up. We actually have to implement creating solutions. So when you read the E-Myth, I forget if you look at like Amazon will say, 100 million copies of that book was sold. Maybe 50 people actually did it. It's like, we got to go ahead and do the stuff. And so creating SOPs, effective delegation, one of the best ways I like to create SOPs is when I'm training a new person. I say, write this stuff down. Here's the form I want you to use. And they love doing it because they're, taking those notes and this will be great because then I'll remember. And then I'm like, okay, do me a favor, type that up and send it over to me. And then I put it in the SOP book, Then they look at it when they're training the next person. They're like, wait a minute, I wrote this. I'm like, yes, you did. This is awesome, This is great. Thank you for helping us to build this system, right? When we had to scale back on my first company, that was one of the first targets, and it was a hard target. We started looking at customers that weren't profitable, and we were like, ooh, we're going to tell some people that we really like serving sometimes that we're not going to be able to serve them anymore. And so
being the marketing got really hard on me.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about I'm supposed to get rid of customers.
Right.
Wait a minute.
That's right. You're absolutely right. And I think that that's a great feedback as well, because when we look at the bottlenecks in our company, sometimes our customers are that. And so we got to look at that and make sure we're serving the right market and really going after things. I've known Matt for a long time. We were about the same height when we met. And man, he's grown a lot since then. And, when we first met, they were serving the restaurant industry pretty much exclusively on $99 and $199 deals. And they were competing with a lot of people and going from there. And we had some mindset conversations and moved to $1,000 and $2,000 clients. And that's a difficult shift because you have to realize a lot of people you've been serving are not right for you anymore. But if you want to reach your financial goals, you can't, you need 1 million people at that price point to hit your goal versus, a couple hundred, and it made a huge difference. And so we've got to look at all the different bottlenecks and ways. And that's great too, because as we're getting outside the box, some of these attainable and the smart components start to shift a little bit to say, well, wait a minute, are we looking at this right? Because if you have a $500,000 goal for one of your customers and they're selling $50 parts, that could be part of the problem. Do they know that you have these large commercial units that are $50,000 a piece or $100,000 a piece? How do we sell one of those this year? And now all of a sudden they're like, oh, I know a guy who has a building like that, you know, and all of a sudden we start shifting the way we think. So
what happens if you have a customer who is too big to fire, but he feels like he owns you, and is that law?
it's a great question. This is really fresh for me because my son Levi is going through this right now with a large customer, and they're difficult in certain areas, and it is really creating a stress on him, and it's a distraction for his growth in the company. It's actually slowing his growth down because he's focused so much on this one customer. And so we spoke recently and spent some time game planning the circumvention of the need for that customer. And so we've got a 90-day plan to replace the revenue with that customer, making some investments in additional things so that within 90 days we can call that customer and say, either these things need to change or we can't service you anymore, and we'll work with you for 30 days and help you find the right person to take care of you. But in the meantime, we're sorry, we can't operate. We're not aligned well, so we just, we need to move on. So cash flow mismanagement is really number 2 reason why businesses fail to scale and creating unsustainable growth. This is where leverage can come in and play a nasty role in what we do. I see a lot of people who look at their profit and loss statement, and when they read a profit and loss statement, they do not see the principal payments on loans going out. So they see that they're profitable by $100,000, but then on the balance sheet, which most people are not as familiar with, they see that they spent $200,000 on principal payments to their note. And so that creates a problem because they're not making the money they think they're making, or they're not doing as well as they think they're doing because they've leveraged for the sake of scaling. I absolutely say if you're smart and set it up properly, leveraging is great. You can absolutely use bank money or investor money or whatever it is you can do to need to scale. You just need to have the tools and the resources to do it. So the solution to the cash flow management problem is truly being proactive and understanding your financial situation and the impact of your scaling. One of the things that I really like to do with business owners is work on trigger points. Once we have this going on, then we're ready to go ahead and hire. I like to say, hey, if you're going to make an investment in another staff member, and they're going to help you to generate more income through your company, whether they're in the administrative side or with a support team or a salesperson, then we need to have 90 days of cash in the bank to cover their salary before we hire them, or else we're going to get 30 days down the road and we're going to be hypersensitive to their performance or what the company's doing because they're there. If it takes a little longer to train something or someone got sick along the way, we immediately go to the expense thought process versus the investment thought process, and we start to cannibalize ourselves really quick. So create certain triggers in your business to know when you can take on extra business so that your goals, to John's point, are smart and attainable and relevant and all the things that need to happen. And timely could mean relevant to cash flow capability. And so when we scale our businesses, we want to make sure that we don't run out of cash as we're growing, which is the number 1 reason small businesses go out of business in America today within the first 5 years. Next up, weak market demand. How many of you have experienced a problem with that before, where you had a product that was flying off the shelves, so to speak, or doing really well, and then all of a sudden market demand shifted, whether it shifted because of competition, change of technology, relevance to the marketplace? Well, this is something just to make sure we're aware of and prepare for. I know some of us go through that from time to time, but we need to understand that weak market demand doesn't mean people don't want our products. It may simply mean that there's, again, higher demand, price-related issues, things that are out of our control so we can stay relevant in the marketplace or look for alternatives. Because unfortunately, one of the best lessons I had to learn in my first company was that if I kept doing the same thing and failing at it, doing more of it wasn't helping me. The first company, after I left the hospitality industry, which I was in for about 25 or 30 years, I actually started a company in the medical field. And we had an amazing start. So in the first year, I joined a group of sales guys they all had left companies selling services to doctors and laboratories and things of that nature. And I knew nothing about it, but a friend of mine who was one of these 4 guys, they were selling all day long, doing a great job, bringing no dollars to the bank. And so he called me, he's like, man, you need to look at what we're doing, and we don't know how to figure out how to make money. And so spent a little time, did a little consulting, ended up joining the company, running the company from an operational perspective and a financial perspective. We grew from $500,000 the first year to $12 million in the second year. and had an amazing time. I mean, it was fun. We were doing some really cool stuff. The next year we did $2 million because a minor change in the way that the primary service that we offered was billed. It used to be billed on an individual basis, and they went back and started doing it on a bundled basis. And we, like you, we didn't set the price. We simply were the middleman. And when you take 80% of the profits away, the middleman loses because the product still needed to be serviced. And so, for about 6 or 9 months, we continued to try and do a lot more of what we were doing because we were better at it than most. Like, we were really good in the industry, but we failed miserably. And so it was just one of those things. And so I realized that we were going nowhere fast. And when my bride started to push want ads in front of me and say, hey, this job looks really good, maybe you should think about it, The biggest lesson was learning how to scale back as easily as I knew how to scale forward. And so I had to look, and our company already has triggers for scaling backwards. And that's a really important part of the lesson that I was going to talk about in a few minutes, but we're already getting close on time. But scaling backwards is really important. You should just have a plan. The plan says, if we hit this number, we have to look at it. Once we hit this number, we have to take action. And here's the action that we have to start thinking about so that when it happens, we can start scaling back. The worst, it was probably 3 or 4 weeks where I didn't sleep, just knowing I was going to have to lay people off because I was never going to be the company who had to do that. I was, we were going to find a way. And the way was we had to let some people off the boat so the boat didn't sink. And so we were able to keep it. I still actually own this company today. But we do different things, and we moved around and scaled a little bit. But yeah, it was a trying time, but a big lesson learned. So we can talk some more about that if you like. So the next thing is hiring. Now we talk about this a lot. We've had Mark speak to us, who's a human resource professional. We've talked about it. Cassie and I have had some conversations recently, and Scott, gosh, how do we find the right people? And that's a challenge. I would say, I own a franchise company, and in the franchise company, people say, well, oftentimes we'll have their onboard meeting or during the sessions when you're learning about the franchise, people often ask, what's the most difficult part of the business? Because I don't care what business you're in, the most difficult part is this one, the human resource side, the human side. As a Christian, the number one problem we have is the people, right? Because if we were really all Christ-like, number one, we wouldn't need to do all this, but number two, then Christ wouldn't be Christ. And so we have a separation here. And because of that, we have the human condition to deal with. And so as Christian business leaders, this is an area where we should be really hyper-focused. How do we become good stewards? How do we find out what the people we're hiring want for themselves, what motivates them, what inspires them, so that whether they are frying French fries or whether they're our lead project manager who's talking to all of our customers directly and such a vital person in our team, how do we keep them motivated and get them going? So we need a plan for that. As you're scaling, the E-Myth lays it out really well. Let's build that org chart. And unfortunately on the org chart, and I remember doing something on the E-Myth where I had the org chart and it was the same face in all the blocks except for one where there was just one guy that was called the team, and so it just is what it is. But then we need to start replacing those key people as we grow and scale, knowing what area they need to be on. Brad brought up a great point. Do they need to be on the fundraising side or do they need to be on the operational side? Where are they going to fit in so that we can get through the bottleneck we're currently experiencing so that we can get to the goal? And so hiring the wrong team or scaling too fast can be really detrimental. That's where we need to have a good plan in place. We also need to be quick to performance manage if people are not meeting the expectations or fitting in with the team. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you found it valuable, don't forget to give it a like. Also, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. And if you want more in-depth videos and resources to scale your small business, check out my business growth course in the description. Thank you.